Okay, the Premier League has agreed to scrap showing matches on the pay-per-view format. It's been nothing short of a PR and financial disaster for the Premier League and the TV companies as well. Considering that on the first night it was brought in, Leeds United fans, Leeds were one of the first games shown on the pay-per-view format, instead of paying to watch the pay-per-view, they raised £300,000 for local charities. So that's £300,000 that the Premier League and the TV companies lost out on day one. Liverpool, on day two of the protests, decided to raise a similar amount. I think it was about £360,000 for charity out of their fan groups, rather than going on the pay-per-view. So already £660,000 out of two clubs was raised for charity. That's over £500,000 that the Premier League and the TV companies could have made out of pay-per-view, didn't go on pay-per-view, went to local charity. Other clubs and fan groups got involved. I think Newcastle were in there, West Brom, I think Arsenal, Chelsea, you name it. I think every Premier League club, at some point, a fan group has decided to, instead of paying to watch on the pay-per-view, have decided to give that £14.95 and put it in a charity pot. So all told, a couple of million quid's been raised by supporters groups up and down the country for charity, rather than going into the Premier League's pocket. And part of the reason for that was, if we're going to spend money, let's spend it for good cause. A lot of fans have said football's got too much money in it. It's lost touch with its working class origins. The players are paid too much, and the Premier League, well, is holding the lower leagues to ransom over their aid package. And only 78 people, by the way, paid for Burnley West Brom. So if let's say it's £1.50. Let's work it out. So 15 quid, just under, times 78. If you work that 80 times 10 is 800 quid. It would have made roughly about £1,200 was made by the Premier League that night, roughly, if you include VAT and a few other bits and pieces. 1,200 quid approximately was made out of Burnley West Brom. Over £3 million has been raised by charity and fans in protest at the pay-per-view format, yet one game made just over £1,000, legitimately, for the Premier League. I think the financial figures were part of the reason why the Premier League and the broadcasters decided to scrap the idea very, very quickly. Also, the PR disaster. This is a league that's obsessed with its public image. They're obsessed about their image abroad as well, because they want to sell the game to the overseas market, which again has led to change of kick-off times, which has angered fans. But in this case, fans are allowed in attendance at stadiums, so we'll take that argument as a pinch of salt. But they can't keep their own fan base, domestic fan base, on side. A fan protest where they've hit the Premier League and the TV companies in the wallet has been effective. Fan boycott has been effective. It has led to a change. What I find interesting is at the end of last season, games were on free-to-air TV as well as on subscription, and the 3 PM blackout was lifted. Why didn't the Premier League and the TV companies agree to the free-to-air principle again? Because there were growing calls for it from the end of last season to have more games on free-to-air TV, actually as a permanent, long-term thing. I think that's going to be back on the agenda now. Just the simple fact that fans would rather give their money to charity than to their clubs in the Premier League and the TV companies tells you all you need to know about how bad an idea this was. But this is a sport that has been beset by player misbehaviour during the lockdown, of players just having wild parties and breaching lockdown rules back in March and April, all the way through till now. Actually, this is a sport that claims it can't afford to pay its non-playing staff, so furloughed them, but still player wages, including Gareth Bale's, for example, around unabated. Clubs that claim they can't afford to pay non-playing staff yet go in the transfer market and spend over £1 billion, which they claim they can't afford to pay to their non-playing staff. So read into that what you will. Player wages, for example, Gareth Bale, Tottenham are paying half of his wages. That's £300,000 a week. That's £1.2 million over a month he gets paid by the club he's playing for. The other £1.2 million gets paid by the club that owns his rights. That's £2.4 million he earns in a month, and that is before tax, if he's paying any, because we know players like evading and avoiding tax via various schemes. Yet the players refuse to take wage and salary cuts and deferrals because apparently that would harm the NHS. Yet players have been found guilty of tax evasion. May not be in this country, but we know they like to not pay their taxes. So yeah, football's had a litany of negative headlines for the last 8 months, and this has just topped it off. And fans have had enough. Fans have had enough. What replaces pay-per-view? Probably free-to-air coverage, because that's what the growing calls are. We know there's a parliamentary select committee dragging the head of the FA, the head of the Premier League, and the head of the EFL over the coals this coming week. We know that there's still ongoing rifts between the Football League clubs and the Premier League clubs over the rescue package, which hasn't been agreed upon. The EFL clubs of League One and League Two rejected the £50 million aid package that the Premier League waved in front of them as a bribe. The Championship rejected the, I think, £200 million aid package that was waved in front of them. Liverpool and Man United's idea to reshape the Premier League and protect themselves from relegation and have strengthened voting rights was rejected by the other clubs. The Super League format went down like a lead balloon. The European Super League. Fans have had enough of the way football can't govern itself and the greed of the sport. The utter greed of the sport. And what now for the pay-per-view format for sports in general? Because Eddie Hearn, he loves a pay-per-view when it comes to boxing, and his just grotty persona. I can't stand Eddie Hearn or the pay-per-view format. What does that leave? Where does that leave the pay-per-view format going forward long term? Because if football has been rejected, how long can boxing and MMA, for example, continue? And kickboxing and other pay-per-view sports formats, how long can they sustain that format? But if fans of sport, or football in this case, but of sport, have rejected the pay-per-view so unanimously in the space of a week and a half, 2 weeks, how sustainable was it long term? And is there going to be more free-to-air coverage coming forward, not just for football, but for other sports as well? That could be a knock-on effect out of a fan protest. But we'll see what happens. But the Premier League has decided to scrap showing matches via pay-per-view. Thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts below. I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon.